welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. The United Nations says the threat of terrorism in Afghanistan and in the region as well is rising because a range of terrorist groups have got greater freedom to maneuver under the Taliban de facto authorities. Now, this particular concern has been raised in the 14th report of the Analytical Support and the Sanctions Monitoring Team of the United Nations Security Council's 1988 Taliban Sanctions Committee. The report also says the link between the Afghan Taliban and both Al-Qaeda and Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan is strong and symbiotic. The report also talks how the Taliban took some action against the ISIL Khorasan, but they have not delivered on counter-terrorism provisions under the agreement which was reached with the United States to bring peace and stability in Afghanistan. Now, the report also talks about how the Taliban, under the leadership of Hibatullah Akhundzada, have reverted to exclusionary, Pashtun-centered autocratic policies of the Taliban administration of the late 90s. The report also has mentioned some sort of dissent within the Afghan Taliban leadership. It also talks about ISIL Khorasan, Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, Taliban finances, effectiveness of sanctions, arms embargo as well. Now, regarding this particular report by the United Nations, there has been a response by the Afghan Taliban. They have dismissed this particular report, saying this report is full of prejudice. Now, the Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid in a statement said, let me quote, that Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan insists on its commitments and assures that there is no threat from the territory of Afghanistan to the region, neighbors and the countries of the world, and it does not allow anyone to use its territory against others, unquote. Let me quickly bring in our panelists to discuss about the concerns which have been raised in this particular report and the kind of response that we have got from the Afghan Taliban on this particular report. We are honored to have been joined in the studio by Dr. Ziya Shamsi, is expert in international relations. Dr. Ziya Shamsi, thank you very much for joining in. And at the same time on Skype, we are being joined by Brigadier retired Haris Nawaz, he is senior analyst. Brigadier Nawaz, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. Let me begin the discussion with you, Dr. Ziya Shamsi. Now, the findings which have been shared in this particular report by the United Nations, are they concerning? If so, how concerning do you think they are?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much for inviting me over the studio. It is very concerning. However, this is not a surprise to us. Why? Pakistan has long been calling that there is a strong connection of TTP with the elements or rogue elements inside Afghanistan. Pakistan has been raising this issue time and again. Pakistan has been providing dossier in this regard. Pakistan has been protesting to Afghan government, Taliban government, to the UN, to all the other stakeholders for a long time now. However, unfortunately, Pakistan's concerns were never given any serious thought, either by Taliban government or by the UN or by other regional stakeholders or global stakeholders. That is the unfortunate part, and that is why it remains concerning. Why? Because we lose people, we lose lives, we lose property, and there is greater uncertainty inside Pakistan because of these elements' surprise attacks, because they operate through inner sleeping cells. They get support from outside, active support, which is usually discovered sometimes before the attack has materialized due to our active movement or what we say is
the vigilance of the intelligence apparatus.
Intelligence based operations that we find out and we take countermeasures. For that, our intelligence agencies and armed forces and all the security agencies who are involved deserve appreciation. They take it on the chest, they take it on the chin. However, sometimes sometimes the operation could be so covert that it gets missed and we end up losing lives. That is why there is no other country that is affected with this collaboration of TTP with the other cells or rogue elements inside Afghanistan, to which, as you said, that Afghan government has vehemently denied. However, we will not accept that because we suffer.
Right. Let me bring in Brigadier Nawaz also into the discussion. Let me take his view regarding the findings which have been shared in this particular report by the United Nations. Brigadier Nawaz, what's your understanding of these findings? How concerning do you think these are?
You see, the point is, United Nations report, I think, is to an extent, it's clearly manifest that the capacity of these rogue elements, they are increasing. And that includes Al-Qaeda, then IS, Khorasan, TTP, and then Islamic Movement of Turkestan. They are the ones who are being again nourished over there because they're the basic reason. The reason is that Afghan Taliban, they don't have a politically inclusive government. Their funds have already been frozen, they're not being released. When they don't have a rate of the government, they don't have a control over the entire area. So that's how things are going to create difficulty. Then while going to American, what they did, they left a lot of ammunition and weapon ammunition unattended. And that has fallen into the hands of particularly Pakistan facing, that's why we are facing difficulty. That is, it is the TTP, then it's BLF, DLA, they're all got this ammunition, they have the latest ammunition. So that is what it is. Pakistan government is very concerned. We have told many times to Afghan Taliban that these are reasons, these are a concern. What we want you to is only ensure that your land is not being used against infiltration and terrorism in Pakistan. Our defense minister who went over there, he told them very categorically that these are problems, and if you can't control them, we can go for selective surgical strikes so that they're all, or the places of where they get together, we can destroy them. But the issue is that Afghan Taliban's uh, ideology and TTP ideology are the same. TTP has been supporting Afghan Taliban when they were fighting against Americans, so now they don't have a political will, mental resolve to sort them out. This is one of the basic factors why we are concerned, and we are having more terrorism. I think the year of 1.5 years, we got over 100 attacks. And that is a big problem Pakistan is facing. You know, every day our soldiers are being injured and then getting shahadat, and there are civilians, we see lost life. Americans have to realize that they have left problems for Pakistan in this region. Not only for Pakistan, I would say for Central Asian countries and Afghanistan itself. So unless you provide them financial support, unless you defreeze their all the, financial assets which you have already frozen, how would they have a rate of the government time? Afghan Taliban, they don't realize one thing, that you have to have a politically inclusive government. It should not be only Pashtun strength, but it has to be Tajiks, Hazaras. There's so many other things, Northern Alliance all over there. Unless you have everyone included as per their ethnic representation, then it will have, say, problem. Then they will have a rate of the conduct all over Afghanistan, and then they can exert also. They have carried out operation. Bhari was killed. I know that it's a lot of effort of Afghan Taliban, but these are one, two incidents. There are a lot of people over there, and they don't have control. They are creating problem for Pakistan. Pakistan is really suffering, and we have told very categorically to Afghan government, okay, please ensure your land is not used. We have got a lot of fencing, almost fencing against the western border is completed, but still they're coming because there are routes from where we allow them to enter in Pakistan, commercial and trade reasons, and people have to come across to Peshawar. They have their relatives. They're all Pashtun. Both sides are living relatives. We have a difficult position, and that's why Pakistan is very have a measured response. We can't go all out against the ones, and then we say no, we're going to go surgical strike. These are the factors why Pakistan is more concerned. American must realize that Pakistan is having a problem. We are a victim of terrorism. This includes BLA, BLF up to Balochistan. Unless Balochistan is peaceful, unless Afghanistan is peaceful, we cannot have operationalized our Gwadar port and CPAC. These are our concerns, Chinese concern. China has invested a lot of money in Afghanistan. But the problem is This is a collective response, and this collective response has to be from other regional countries like Russia. They are, of course, supporting Pakistan, China, but it is basically Europe and America who has created problem in Afghanistan. So this is how we have to find problems. We have to finish problems. We have to find a solution. So far, it looks very difficult, and this has to be resorted. Pakistan has to go to Islamic countries like OIC, and then their platform will be used to go to UN, and then we'll tell them that this is what is the solution. We have a dossier, but we have to present it in a way that is accepted by all the countries in the world.
Brigadier Nawaz, we understand that it is very imperative for Pakistan to engage with the international community, especially when we talk about the US and its role in Afghanistan, and impress upon it that there is a concern, a heightened concern regarding the presence of banned Taliban Pakistan using the Afghan soil and operating from there to carry out terrorist activities. But there happens to be naturally the responsibility of the Afghan Taliban, as this particular report alludes to the fact that they have been carrying out strikes and operations against ISIL Khorasan. Rather, we haven't seen such type of concrete action on the part of the Afghan Taliban when it comes to the banned Taliban Pakistan. And of course, Pakistani authorities have been repeatedly, continuously been asking the Afghan authorities to fulfill their commitment. And the kind of response that we have got from the Afghan Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid, who categorically once again denies that this particular report is full of prejudice and there is no threat to any neighbor or any country of the world from Afghan soil.
I totally disagree with Abila Bajaj. He is talking wrong. Every time the land is being used against us, and there is no will. Afghan Taliban have a soft corner for KTP. Let me be very open and clear. And that is what Pakistan shows concern. Our DGI also went over there. Then the defense minister went. DGI accompanied him. Before that, I think we sent. They were. I think PPP leader, lady leader, she had gone over there. But the problem is, we have to now very forceful. We can't every time we keep telling them, they're not realizing. Problem is that we want to complete our CPEC, and the road to CPEC is Afghanistan. But let me show you one thing: that Americans and they don't want peace in Afghanistan. If Afghanistan is a peaceful, means we operationalize our CPEC, we operationalize Gwadar port, then centralization connectivity with through Afghanistan we have in Gwadar port. Chinese they also start coming over there. So that is the reason we are an Islamic country. We are a nuclear country. We have very good geostrategic location. The only thing we lacking is our economic prosperity. If we economically prosper and we can take independent decisions in national interest, that is the problem we have. Then Americans are using India as a proxy. They are creating terrorism in Pakistan. American doesn't. They know all what is happening. Who is doing problem. Do they want that India should not interfere? If they stop, it will be definitely done. The problem is these are the realities which we are having a problem. So that in that context, I am saying Pakistan has to go with diplomatic offensive. One, doses should be taken. Our good communication skills team of senators should go and tell the world what is happening. They should go to the United Nations, 5 permanent members, 10 non-permanent members. We must tell them what is happening. Though I know Foreign Office is doing their best job, they have been communicating. Still, we have to tell. We have all word of ambassadors in Islamabad. We should call them Foreign Office and convey where we are finding difficulty. Pakistan is facing lot of problems. Economic problems can't be resolved till we have a political instability in Pakistan. Only then we have a foreign investment. CPEC is the best option. It's economic jump point for Pakistan. For that, we need peace in Afghanistan. We have told many times Afghan Taliban they are not understanding. They still feel that they are in 1990s era. The time has changed. You have to change yourself. You have to give rights to the woman which they are not. You are not allowing, and that's why America is not releasing. There is human rights violation. You don't have writ all over Afghanistan. You need to because you don't have ethnic representation in your government. So these are the realities we have. Pakistan has tried their best. Despite economic crunch, we have not stopped any trade with them. Afghan trouser trade, we are allowing it. People are coming and going. In that, we know certain elements they come in and then they create problems. Afghan Taliban's 3 million we are hosting. That is a big problem. It's a big nursery. There are a lot of facilitators hiding over there. They've got the national identity card in Pakistan. So these are the issues. Because we can't deny the Pashtun brothers. They are both sides. The Peshawar and KPK have Pashtuns and their relatives are across the border. So these are the real problems for Pakistan, and that we have to realize. Now is the time we have to take very bold decision. We have to tell United Nations that if you can't do this, please take your guests of Afghan Taliban and take them into Afghanistan. Afghan Taliban will only then realize that how much Pakistan has been helpful to them for providing, despite economic crime, we're supporting them. So these are the things we have to do. I think we need to more do work, despite the fact we have done a lot, but we need to move forward. We helped a lot to Afghan government during the withdrawal of Americans. How we brought their people in Pakistan and then we shifted them through by air. I think the European Union, America should be very thankful to us. But they must listen to us what are the problems and who has created the problem, so they have to resolve the problem now.
Right. Let me bring in Dr. Shamsi once again. Dr. Shamsi, when we talk about this report, there is clearly a mention in this particular report that the Afghan Taliban's relationship with the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan is the closest of all the militant outfits present over the on the Afghan soil. Now, the Taliban do not consider TTP a threat to Afghanistan, but rather a part of the emirate. This particular report goes on to say, as Brigadier Nawaz was mentioning regarding the finances, the kind of support Pakistan has been giving to the Afghan people. Now, Pakistan remains to be Afghanistan's largest trading partner. And the kind of role Pakistan had played previously, we've seen in the peace and reconciliation efforts also. So naturally, there happens to be a responsibility on the shoulders of Afghanistan, given the fact that this United Nations report says that the Afghan-Taliban relationship with banned TTP is the closest. What are the options at the hand of Pakistan's authorities?
In fact, if we are expecting that Taliban would recognize the sacrifices of Pakistan or the support of Pakistan, I think we are mistaken. They would never. Historically, they have not. Neither the first Taliban government nor the second Taliban government. They would never recognize. Afghans, if you talk to a common Afghan in the streets of Islamabad, he has full of venom against Pakistan because of various reasons, historical reasons, whatever reasons. So I do not expect any good from present Taliban regime as well for Pakistan. No goodwill exists in Kabul at this time for Pakistan. It is Islamabad which has to play a role all by itself. Just see within 2 years, inside 2 years that the Americans left Afghanistan, the situation has totally reversed. Until Americans were there in Kabul, we were asked that Pakistan should ensure that its soil is not used for attacks inside Afghanistan, isn't it? Less than 2 years, we are asking the world, the UN, the Americans, and Taliban government that ensure that Afghan soil is not used against Pakistan, isn't it? Unfortunately, at this time, the global players are not interested in Afghanistan as much as they were earlier, perhaps because of the ongoing Ukraine war. Everybody, the whole of NATO and everybody is busy in the Ukraine war, supporting Ukraine against Russia, and that is why there is less effort invested towards Afghanistan. However, I fully agree with the Brigadier Sahab that Americans never been interested in peace in Afghanistan, and so is reflected in their actions also.
So, but they have continuously offered unconditional support to Pakistan to fight the banned TTP in particular.
They do. They do. I mean, they are just verbatim of all the previous statements that the White House or the State Department keeps on issuing. What is the support on ground? How much of support Pakistan is getting on ground? Nothing. Pakistan, in spite of its acute economic issues, is fighting this war once again all alone. We do not find any support in counter-terrorism operations, either from America or from European countries or even from our friendly countries at this time. We are doing it all alone, out of our own resources, which are limited, rather very scarce at this time.
So what about the regional countries when you talk about Iran, Russia and China? They've got some interest that there must be peace and stability in Afghanistan.
They have.
So how Pakistani authorities can collaborate with them to find that very common ground?
Actually, as I mentioned, the focus has shifted to Ukraine at this time. China also, Russia, obviously it is engaged in a full-fledged war, and other countries also. So at this time, it is Pakistan alone that has to face it and take it on the chin.
What about Afghanistan being the transit route? And once the Chinese leadership and Pakistani leadership both have offered them to become part of the CPAC or the BRI also.
Yeah, that offer stands. That offer stands. We would like to have Afghanistan on our side.
So that doesn't give any indication that Chinese interest in Afghanistan is reduced?
No. Chinese interest in Afghanistan would remain so. However, Chinese, as you know, they do not do anything in a hurry. They are a very old civilization. They want to do things slowly and gradually. Okay? They waited for Hong Kong for 50 years and they say that we can wait for Taiwan for another 50 years. So Afghanistan, they will not do anything in a hurry. They have made commitments, they will fulfill it, but at the time and place of their own choosing. Pakistan at this time is really, I also feel that we are left alone. However, we must continue our diplomatic offensive. We must keep on reminding the world of their responsibilities. We must keep on reminding the Taliban of their responsibilities, and we must tell them that these sufferings that we are going through for the last 40 years will not continue forever.
Right. We are joined by another participant on the phone line, Mr. Iftikhar Firdous, is expert of Afghan affairs and associated with the Khorasan Diary. Mr. Iftikhar Firdous, thank you very much for joining in at Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. What's your understanding of this particular latest report by the United Nations regarding the links of the Afghan Taliban with Al-Qaeda? And particularly when we talk about the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, we've seen repeatedly the Pakistani authorities have raised their concern regarding the TTP operating from the Afghan soil to carry out the terrorist acts in Pakistan.
I think it's very important to understand the timing of the report and when it was compiled. When we look at some of the statistics that the report has actually given, they aren't actually accurate. And I have serious doubts in terms of the details that have been provided, particularly reference to the Islamic State of Khorasan, as well as some of the capabilities that have been defined in terms of the number of fighters, as well as the relationship between some of these groups. For example, the report says that there have been like more than 200 suicide bombings by the Islamic State of Khorasan. That actually has never happened. The number of suicide bombings that have taken place are not more than 7 combined Afghanistan and Pakistan. Simultaneously, it says that there are about 4,000 to 6,000 TTP fighters. You know that Pakistani authorities believe that the number of, in terms of families along with fighters, is much larger. Also, in terms of the operational capabilities of the relationship between the Afghan Taliban and particularly with Al-Qaeda, that is something of concern. And we've seen countries like the United States previously ringing the alarm bells, saying that some of the top Al-Qaeda operatives are by default running the Emirates, which is the Afghan Taliban government in Afghanistan. So I think these are points of concern. But however, in terms of what their operational capabilities is and how this should be tackled, the outline hasn't been provided by the United Nations in its report. Secondly, it also does not mention in terms of its relationship with other countries, of the relationship particularly of the Afghan Taliban with other countries in terms of what sort of diplomatic pressures have been applied so far. As far as the TTP's chapter is concerned, obviously there is a huge concern from the Pakistani side of the TTP being able to carry out attacks in Pakistan. Um, Last month was probably the largest number of attacks carried out by the TTP since 2014, which surpassed almost 70 attacks. Although the claims are exaggerated, but obviously the attacks have taken place in one way or another. So we've seen the Afghan Taliban in recent months announcing that they will rein in the TTP, and there is a program through which they will relocate them from the border somewhere close to Helmand. But in terms of actuality, the report seems to have been compiled much before the happenings of March and February. I think the findings are somewhat lax in terms of what they actually think happened last year and its effects being this year. So I would take the report with a pinch of salt in terms of what its implications are, but obviously it's the United Nations, and definitely many countries would take it seriously and build their foreign policy in accordance to what has been done so far. Nevertheless, as you mentioned, that Al Qaeda does seem to be a threat, and if you evaluate the rest of the propaganda of Al Qaeda currently, it does show a deep pattern of linkages not just with the TTP but the Afghan Taliban, which means that almost all three groups that have particularly posed threats to Pakistan previously are aligned. How does Pakistan actually play the diplomatic card in terms of applying the pressure? But that alone would not be sufficient. The requirement is definitely there that the international uh, bodies such as the UN, along with other diplomatic level of channels, are activated to apply the pressure. It cannot be that at the same time the Afghan Taliban are funded and simultaneously they also try to harbor such groups to carry out attacks in the neighboring countries. One thing that is actually missing, and which I think is of the larger concern, that although Pakistan has been through one of these stages, we managed to build up capabilities to fight active insurgencies. I think this time, one of the major concerns is also that we see terror networks now expanding towards Central Asia, and obviously with all the references to the China economic, Pakistan, economic corridor, as well as all other investments that people have been eyeing in terms of regional economies and the way that the geopolitics is framed so far. I think that the security lens is now directly intervening into the economic paradigm, which obviously is a concern for regional countries, not just Pakistan alone. Yes.
Right, Mr. Firdous, this particular report also mentions dissent within the Taliban leadership. Let me quote an excerpt from it, that the principal split within the Taliban leadership lies between the factions representing Kandahar and Kabul power bases. It also talks about the battling internal conflict over key policies, centralization of power and the control of the financial and the natural resources in Afghanistan. Ongoing power struggles are further destabilizing the situation, which have the likelihood outbreak of armed conflict between the rival factions being a manifest risk. What's your understanding of the internal conflict within the Taliban leadership, and what does, if it actually exists on the ground, what does that depict?
There is a part of the politics of combat in terms of who gains the larger front, and then there is the economic part of it. Obviously, with international sanctions and literally the economy running dry in Afghanistan, with the sustainability of the economy being hinged either on the border trade or either on international, funding. Uh, One of the main reasons that the Afghan Taliban have actually rejuvenated the trade on the Pakistani side as well as on the Afghan side, and trying to expand their relationship with the Central Asian countries in terms of borders is actually to keep their economy alive. If you look at the Afghan budget, they are almost about 490 billion Afghani short in terms of what their actual requirements are. And then you look at the trade capacities that they've managed to build up. Interestingly, after August 15, 2021, when we see, one of the first things that the Afghan Taliban have managed to do is that they've managed to actually set up the Asikuda system, which is on the Pakistani plates, the system like we have the V-Box on the Pakistani side, which is actually a centralized taxation system through which revenues are generated at the border, and then these revenues are directly put into a centralized system where the federal government sort of, release them for different public initiatives. Similarly, the Assecuda system, which was maintained by the Americans but was never sort of implied or put into execution by Ashraf Ghani or Hamid Karzai. One of the main reasons for that being that there were multiple checkpoints. Even if you wanted to reach from Torkham to Kabul, there were at least 17 checkpoints, and one had to pay, bribes so that transportation would be allowed. So, as a CUDA system, a centralized system with which revenues were being generated, would never come into work at that time because it was not a possibility to control that kind of corruption. The Afghan Taliban on the 23rd of September managed to actually rely on the Assecuda system, and they made it fully functional. From the statistics available right now, they managed to earn about $1.5 billion of revenue just from the trade of it. Now, if you look at the model that they had been adopting, if the Torkham corridor previously had 17 checkpoints and 6 of them were from the Afghan National Army, the rest of them were, 11 of them were by the Afghan Taliban and particular groups. And this is not just on Torkham. Open up the 5, different borders that we have with Afghanistan, including the ones from Haradan towards Central Asia. The Afghan Taliban were de facto in control of those areas. The Afghan regime itself was only present in more of the urban localities. So most of these groups, in terms of their economic interests, were relying on the trade corridors in these areas. Now, when it becomes a centralized system, the distribution, if it's not equal, it obviously hurts the incentives of a certain group. When the UN report actually says that there is a power dominion that is combating within itself in Kandahar and Kabul, it's not just Kandahar and Kabul, it's actually 3 different factions. They minus the part in which the Doha political front is actually activated. At this point, the international community is actually they are confused as who to talk to because the representatives are different from the ones that actually make these decisions. And I think that this problem in terms of their differences will exacerbate, later on. We've seen not just the economic and the political part of it, but decision making in terms of like girls' education, where previously some of the ministers have actually outspoken and said that women and, a girl should be allowed to attend school. We've seen their supreme leader, Habibullah, then calling them, sacking the education minister. So obviously that kind of, discourse of humor does exist within the Afghan Taliban. And I think that, the problem is for the international community, but not internally to the Afghan Taliban, because they are used to this form of governance. One of the biggest problems is actually on how much of territory do they control. Whether it's the same amount of territory and control and form of governance that they have is the way that the Ashraf Ghani tenure had, along with the help of the NATO troops, or are they just lacking in terms of capacity and it's just Kabul and some central provincial areas that they manage to control, and we see these major attacks being carried out in different localities. So obviously control, politics, as well as internal dissent becomes 3 major issues for the Afghan Taliban currently. And I think for anybody who wants to talk to them, they will have a difficult time. We don't see that kind of coherence being established so far.
For those joining us on the phone line, expert of Afghan affairs associated with the Khorasan Diary, thank you very much for being with us on Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. Brigadier Nawaz, when we talk about this report, it talks about the dissent within the Afghan Taliban leadership, the difference between Kandharis and those present in Kabul. But it also talks about the role of Amir being the paramount to be obeyed, and the kind of decrees or the kind of authorities having. There is no indication that other Taliban leaders can influence a policy substantially. There is little prospect of change in the near to the midterm. What do we understand out of this whole?
You see, in Islamic State, you always have Amir, and everybody had to accept it. Without their having differences within their groups, within their ministries or difficulties. But the only thing is that they don't want to tell the world, and that is creating a problem in Afghanistan. And the answer is only one thing for this all differences, that you have a politically inclusive government. That's why you don't have influence in the northern areas. And for that, the stakeholder is Iran. We always leave Iran. You see, the point is even when Russian was here, the northern line was being supported by Iran and southern side was supported by Pakistan. So now Iran, Pakistan, China, Russia, and Central Asia, they have to sit together and find a solution. Nothing is impossible. The only thing is you have to bring the stakeholders, and that is mainly Pakistan and Iran and Central Asians. But then Russia and China being superpowers, nuclear powers, so they have to be brought inside in this block. Then find a solution. How it has to be done? And Afghan Taliban must understand the requirement of international community, and that is inclusive government, right to women's human rights. Please do it. Why don't you do it? Suffering, and your people are suffering. What have you done in the last 2 years for the people of Afghanistan? About education, health, some industry working, businesses doing flourishing in that area, and they don't have control over the northern side. And there, that's how you have different groups coming up again, splinter
Okay,
groups.
Nawaz,
They're
interestingly, the
creating
report
problems.
tells that they have improved regarding the revenue generation from taxes and the customs also.
That they have improved because they have learned from Pakistan side how they are doing it, and on the borders when trade is coming from there, and then we have a barter responsibility. Then a lot of goods are coming to Pakistan. But the issue is this amount will not help solve their own political and economical problems. So you have to maintain good relationship with the US and European Union. They must recognize you. Why they're not recognizing you? That's the more important. Pakistan couldn't recognize. We have a tacit understanding with you. The China has a tacit understanding with you, but nobody recognizes you. So do something extra for that. They're not realizing that you can't be out of the world community. You have to be part of it. Only then people will come to your support. And then, of course, they don't want peace in Afghanistan. Please do remember. They intentionally left weapon ammunition. They could have handed over to Afghan government. They could have taken back in their own aircraft, but they left it so that it falls into the hands of different groups to create trouble in Afghanistan and to the neighboring countries. And Afghan Taliban had entered into a contract with USA that we will ensure peace. We will not allow our land to be used by any group for global or regional threat. That has not been done. So they have not done their commitment. When you haven't done your commitment, then you don't expect support from all over the world. Pakistan being neighbor, we have brother relationship, we have the Pashtun on both sides. We have to go and share and extend our hands. But then you have to, in return, do one thing only, and that is that don't let anyone operating from your side into Pakistan, and that is TTP. If you push out TTP, that okay, leave our country or disarm yourself or don't do anything against Pakistan, the bridge made easy. If they are pushed, they'll come into the northern belt, and we are going to play hell with them, and they'll finish. Nobody can challenge the rate of the government. But the only thing is they were finding a big refuge. Kandahar is a nice place for them. Kunar is another place where they're hiding themselves. Then Pakistan says, okay, if you're not doing it, we come and do surgical strikes in your area. You have again reservation. But ultimately, then we will have to do it. We can't compromise the security, national security of our own country. We are facing a lot of problems. You must be showing every day we are having soldiers killed and then injured, apart other civilians.
Right.
For that,
Right.
we have to do find some.
Right, Dr. Shamsi, this particular internal division within the Taliban leadership between Kandaharis and those who are based in Kabul, is it good or bad vis-a-vis Pakistan and for the region and for the world?
I think again this is nothing new. This is how the system of Afghan politics has been over the last 40 years, and it is not good for Pakistan. Pakistan does not want any internal divisions because then it becomes very difficult to deal with the Kabul and Kandahar separately. I mean, you cannot have two or three, in that case, governance systems. For instance, for the northern alliance, a separate system, Kandahar separate and Kabul separate. You cannot have that, and Pakistan does not want to have that. Simply speaking, I think I've always maintained that appeasement is a failed strategy. We should stop appeasing Kabul, and we should talk to them straight now. because we have suffered a lot. It cannot go on. As far as the global stakeholders are concerned, as I said, they are at this time busy in Ukraine and less focus on Afghanistan. Secondly, there is no state on the map at this time perhaps where the incumbent regime is not recognized. We expect Taliban to take remedial measures and act against different groups which are operating from Afghan soil, but at the same time we do not recognize them. That is, I think, not fair, because if you're talking to them, that means we are recognizing them. We must remember that it was,
that was the case with the US
agreement.
also. Yes,
That's
US and Taliban agreement. Yes,
that's what I'm coming. Of 29th February 2020 Doha agreement. It is so interesting that you are talking to an entity, and when signing the agreement, you are writing it in bracket that although we do not recognize you.
Oh, there were certain conditionalities associated with that.
That's what I'm
with
hinting
that recognition.
at. That's what I'm hinting at. So I think that is unfair. Holding their money is also not fair. Why? Because the people of Afghanistan are suffering. At least 2 winters have passed since then, and people have.
But who should be more concerned about the suffering of the Afghan people? The regime that is ruling over there right now, or the other countries? I mean, if that particular regime continues to violate the agreements or the conditions they have actually promised to fulfill, and they continue to violate that, why shouldn't they themselves be concerned about the suffering of their own people?
Regime at this time is doing politics, I believe. And when you are doing politics, especially the domestic politics, you don't care for state security, you don't care for the people's well-being. This is unfortunate. But this is what regime is doing. Why? Because regime is fighting for its own survival. It is not recognized, it needs recognition.
So if, here's the scenario, if it is recognized, given recognition by the international major stakeholders, even including Pakistan, do you think they are going to stop continuing violating the promises they made?
They will feel more responsible because they will be funded officially, they will receive their own funds, they will have international recognition, their delegates would go to international fora, okay, and be answerable to the people. And in that case, they would start to invest in their own people as well.
Right.
That's what I believe.
Right. Brigadier Nawaz, what's your understanding of this? Giving them recognition, Dr. Shamsi is of the view perhaps they will feel more responsible in order to fulfill their promises.
It's not only responsibility, then they will have in direct communication. You see, the all world ambassadors over there will be there, the representative will be there, and there will be direct communication all the time. Whatever the concern of Europe, America, the ambassadors are going to talk to the Afghan government, and immediately those issues are resolved. And with recognition, the amount will come, the international economic support will start coming to the country. And with economic prosperity, a lot of things have changed. Their orientation might change. They're used to fighting and then fighting to struggle to get the money, to generate money. Then the money starts coming from all over the world, which they have already given commitments. And that if even half of that money which is frozen comes back, it will create a lot of prosperity. And then when you have people have a job, they have business, girls and boys getting education, then they have a good communication, they have a proper finance ministry, there are a lot of educated people over there with the world community representatives of there, then it has to find a big change. And that's how they will go to the northern side also, and they will have a political inclusive government. That is only possible when they have political inclusive government, only then world is going to recognize them. Because I also feel they must have an ethnic balanced representation. If only Pashtuns are there.
Brigadier Nawaz, when there is so much division within the ranks of the regime itself, how could it be expected they are going to form an inclusive government?
So that's
a
the
quick
reason.
short comment on that.
This is what I say. That is so the Afghan Taliban must understand. Pakistan, I told them many times, please find a solution within yourself. find inclusive ground, bring ethnic representation, bring people from northern allies, and then have spread your control at it all over Afghanistan. That's the key to success for Afghan government.
Right, your point is well taken. Brigadier retired Haris Nawaz, senior analyst, joining us on Skype. I really appreciate you being with us on Views on News tonight. And in the studio, we were joined by Dr. Zia Shamsi, expert in international relations. Dr. Shamsi, thank you very much for your time also being with us on Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Thank you for watching.